The transmission lasted 6 seconds. It was broadcast from Terran diplomatic ship Argosy Dawn to a relay array in orbit above the neutral contact moon designated Cassavel, a crustless sphere of fused glass and impact scars that reflected starlight like a shattered eye. The ship floated above the moon's equator in low orbit, hull polished to a mirror-black sheen, transmitting on all known hegemony frequencies. On the bridge, every crew member held their breath. The message was brief, respectful, and filtered through 9 different linguistic protocols. It included a phrase carefully chosen to convey humility. We come in learning, not dominance. We offer symbol, not sword. Asha Kepler had written it herself. She had chosen the words carefully. We come in learning, not dominance. We offer symbol, not sword. She had reviewed their iconographic equivalents. She had even consulted with 2 captured hegemony codices from the Fractured Ball archive. The message bore no threats, no religious references, no gestures of dominance. And yet, moments after its receipt, the Sha'a-nir fleet group orbiting Cassavel began weapons calibration routines. Dr. Asha Kepler watched the red-lit status monitors from her seat behind the secondary comms console. She did not speak. Neither did Commander Malik Roan, standing by the viewport with arms folded, eyes locked on the movement patterns of the Sha'a-nir warships as they shifted into offensive formation. To the Terran compact, it looked like a slow mobilization, a deterrent stance. To Kepler, it looked like a response, a ritual one. We did something, she thought, pulse climbing. They think we said something. The Sha'a-nir vessels were not built like human ships. Their forms bent inwards and outwards at impossible angles, their hulls composed of interlocking lattice segments that shifted and clicked in synchronized pulses. They resembled skeletal invertebrates caught mid-molt, hovering in stillness yet always in motion. Each vessel bore a central bioluminescent ring, a crown of chemical scent generators and ritual antennae, now glowing pale violet. Asha had read about that color. It meant grievance. Not war, but grievance. The hegemony did not declare war outright. It declared insult. Within minutes, the Sha'a-nir flotilla deployed a dozen honor frigates to high orbit, forming an encirclement pattern. Commander Roan requested silent battle stations. The crew complied without speaking. The bridge fell into tensioned quiet, broken only by the muffled clicks of interface keys and distant hum of compensator fields. Kepler ran the transmission again, this time watching not just the message but the visual symbols surrounding it. Her eyes stung. Her fingers hovered over the sensor panel, trembling slightly. The gesture, that was the only unstructured component. She had included it on instinct. A simple open-handed salute, palm outward, fingers slightly parted. A symbol from old Earth cultures meaning peace or greeting. A human constant, she had thought. A cross-cultural baseline. To the Sha'a-nir, she now suspected, it was something else entirely. Their cultural logic was not abstract, it was embodied. Every movement was a phrase. Every stillness, a counterpoint. Their history was written in scent dispersal and posture arcs. A limb raised in the wrong axis could signify tribal betrayal. A tilt of the torso might reference forgotten wars. There were no symbols detached from the body. Meaning and biology were inseparable. And the human gesture, open hand, fingers splayed, had all the anatomical hallmarks of an ancestral challenge display. From her databanks, she pulled iconographic references from Sha'a-nir social structures. They communicated in scent, posture, and mechanical tone. Shape and motion had meaning, orientation of limbs, angles of extension. An open hand, 5-digit splayed, could be read as a dominance flare or worse, an ancestral reference to submission refusal. She felt the blood drain from her face. A visual error, unspoken but seen. A hand raised in peace that shouted defiance. They think we spit in their face, she said quietly. Roan turned. Then what happens now? Asha didn't answer. The Sha'a-nir weren't mobilizing for a full assault. Not yet. They were entering a phase known in ancient hegemony diplomatic law as the clarification rite. A bounded exchange, controlled, ritualized, limited violence to resolve intent. The problem was, humanity had no idea what that looked like. Across the dark void of Cassavel's orbit, A single Sha'a-nir vessel peeled away from formation. It moved with slow purpose, trailing phenomenal fog from its emitter vanes. Its crown light flared from violet to stark indigo. They were coming to speak. The hegemony spoke with ship maneuvers, with formation, proximity, symbolic threat. The wrong return move could escalate the ritual into a real war. But in silence, humans risked showing cowardice. Asha keyed the comms. Her hand hesitated above the console. She felt Roan's gaze behind her, judgment tightening like a vice. If I'm wrong again, play back the gesture cut. Remove the hand signal. Replace it with a bowed posture frame. Lowered head. Compressed arms. Mimic the Sha'a-nir crouch. Roan's jaw twitched. He did not like the imagery. You're making us look weak. I'm making us look familiar. The new message was transmitted. 30 seconds later, the Sha'a-nir vessel paused. It returned to formation. A ritual de-escalation. Not peace. Not apology. But a stay of immediate reprisal. Roan exhaled through his nose. So we get to try again. Kepler didn't move. She stared out at the alien vessels, each pulsing with unreadable meaning. One wrong gesture. One misunderstood flick of light or movement of metal. No, she whispered. We don't try again. We listen. The first shot was ceremonial. It struck the moon's surface with calculated precision, a kinetic lance fired from low orbit. The impact gouged a 6-kilometer trench into the fused silica crust of Cassavel, sending shockwaves through a world already dead. No atmospheric burn, no radiation, just raw, unambiguous momentum. A line drawn through glass, as if etched by the gods of inertia themselves. On the bridge of the Argosy Dawn, no alarms triggered. The targeting profile had been filtered by Sha'a-nir logic systems, patterned and public, seen and understood. The fire was not aimed at them. Not yet. Commander Roan stood statue still at the tactical station, fingers gripping the cold rail hard enough to turn his knuckles white. The light from the trench strike danced across his features, painting flickers of orange into the lines carved by war and worry. Asha Kepler stood behind him, reviewing telemetry with furrowed concentration. Her hands hovered above the console as if unwilling to commit to motion, the data pouring in faster than she could parse. The rest of the bridge crew stayed quiet, but not still. Eyes flicked between readouts. One tech clutched the edge of her seat, whispering silent calculations. Another stared at the Sha'a-nir vessels on visual overlay, lips pressed into a bloodless line. In the silence, the systems hummed too loudly. Sublethal. Non-escalatory. Aimed to communicate. But the violence of it wasn't abstract. It throbbed through her bones. She could feel the ritual weight in her chest, as if the Sha'a-nir had driven the lance through her ribcage instead of the moon. The Sha'a-nir had spoken. They were an old race, one of the triad founders of the hegemony. Their wars had ended long before human cities knew electricity. Their language, evolved beyond words, required no translation. It was behavior, posture, proximity. A gesture as small as a head tilt could carry the emotional equivalence of a treaty. Or a threat. In ancient protocol, the clarification rite was the pivot between diplomacy and destruction. It opened with a test strike, a demonstration of controlled capability. A bounded wound. A theatrical blow meant not to kill, but to reveal. In return, the other party would respond. Through movement, fire, or silence. The outcome shaped status. For the oldest species of the hegemony, the rite was tradition. For humanity, it was a riddle with no key. Unranked, Asha muttered to herself, her voice almost lost in the ambient hum of ship systems. Untested. Her eyes flicked across the Sha'a-nir formations. Memory surfaced, brief and biting. A projection sim from her years at Nairobi Interstellar Protocol Institute. A virtual battlefield littered with posture signals, scent cloud vectors mapped in color overlays. A mistake made in posture simulation phase 4, she had interpreted a torso dip as deference. It had meant death preparation. The simulation had failed. So had 27 others. If the compact answered incorrectly, too loud, too soft, too soon, they would be labeled disharmonious. And once the designation was filed into the ArchiveNet of the hegemony, every race bound by the accord of structure would be free to strike. No sanctions. No deliberations. No mercy. Roan didn't need the linguistics. He knew stakes. His eyes never left the Sha'a-nir ships outside the viewport. What's the move? Asha hesitated. Her thoughts spun through Sha'a-nir behavioral logs, centuries of archived posture rituals pulled from pre-hegemony military parades. She compared angle trajectories of strike patterns. Considered the absence of lateral roll, the exposed emitter veils left intact. The shot had been pure. Direct. No deception. No curvature to suggest trap or ruse. They want to know if we can hold a line, she said finally. Roan didn't blink. He keyed a channel. Bridge to Vigilant Span confirm contact with Admiral HFY. Request orbital demonstration package. Controlled shot. Non-nuclear kinetic rod. Target. 25 clicks south of current trench coordinates. High sky burn preferred. Spectacle priority. Confirmation protocols rolled back, layered with chain of command call signs and compact engagement code 77B. Ritual fire response. The reply came in under a minute. 1,000 kilometers above, one of the Terran weapon platforms known as Stone Choir began to awaken. Massive petals of reactive shielding folded back like the corolla of a steel flower, revealing a rack of precision drop rods. One disengaged, slow and silent, a glint of tungsten 10 meters long and dense as language. It fell not like a missile, but like a truth. Atmospheric entry lit the sky. A white-orange streak burned across the heavens, too fast to follow, too bright to ignore. The sky over Cassavel erupted in incandescent fury. The rod impacted with sonic absence, the void itself seeming to flinch. A blast crater bloomed beside the Sha'a-nir trench, equal in length, deeper by 30 meters. Shards of molten glass fanned out like a halo. The humans on the Argosy Dawn watched with grim silence. One ensign swallowed audibly while another reached beneath her console to grip a fixed handrail bolted into the floor. Across the deck, systems logged secondary heat bloom, seismics, reflective chemical yields. Every detail archived for review, every frame admissible in interspecies court. Asha's breath caught. Not from sound. Not from fear. But from the fit of it. The reply had matched in scale, in timing, in axis. It had spoken back. Every human I turned to the Sha'a-nir ships. For 13 minutes, nothing moved. Then, with slow precision, the lead vessel pivoted 30 degrees. One by one, the others followed. The crown lights faded from violet to amber. Clarification accepted. They had passed. Not invited. Not welcomed. But acknowledged. No celebration stirred on the bridge. Asha lowered herself into the comms chair and felt every vertebra in her spine complain. Roan remained upright, arms crossed now, as if bracing against something he couldn't see. This isn't over, she said. No, Roan replied. It just started. Beyond Cassavel, the comnet flared. Relay satellites, long dormant, came online. Observatories scattered through the outer dust rings turned inward. Silent probes on the moons of Atropole relayed the event to central hegemony processing spires. Machine rituals awakened. Dozens of systems were watching now. Watching the unranked ones with new consideration. Within the hour, a packet arrived. Encoded in 5-dimensional structure, it carried a ceremonial glyph, the chorus of position. Not war. Not peace. But a formal request for physical presence. The Sha'a-nir had issued an invitation. They wanted to see humanity. Not through words, but through proximity. A test of presence. Of posture. Commander Roan stared at the decoded message, jaw set. They want a face-to-face. Asha didn't nod. She simply stood. Then, quietly, they want to smell us. The descent module had no viewports. Asha Kepler sat strapped into a carbon mesh frame as the drop shuttle rumbled through Cassavel's low-orbit envelope, its outer hull ablating dust and plasma. The cockpit remained sealed. There were no screens, no external feeds. The Sha'a-nir had sent precise coordinates. They had insisted on approach in darkness. The chamber was still. Engine vibrations barely passed through the shock mounts. No one spoke. On the walls around her, silent readouts pulsed, white for oxygen, blue for structural integrity, yellow for biosignal dampening. The last signal remained constant, a band of flickering soft pulses at her feet. Asha tried not to read too much into it. Biodampening wasn't only for protection. It was for inspection, so they could see her clearly without chemical confusion. They wanted the clean version of her presence. Across from her, Roan sat equally still, armored but helmetless, a matte black exosuit tight around his frame. His left hand tapped against his thigh in silent rhythm. Not nervousness, calculation. Every second was time without information. His eyes remained half-lidded, conserving focus, but his posture spoke of anticipation. Once he shifted slightly, only slightly, and exhaled through his nose. A subtle venting of tension, like pressure release from a sealed pipe. The human diplomatic envoy was too, a linguist and a soldier. The Sha'a-nir had requested no others. The module bucked softly as it passed through terminal approach. The descent was unnaturally smooth. Asha suspected Sha'a-nir pathing software had overwritten human controls minutes ago. That, or the compact's engineers had pre-submitted to Sha'a-nir flight heuristics. Either possibility unsettled her. As the shuttle shuddered and began its deceleration burn, Asha thought of the archives. The first record of Sha'a-nir burial patterns showed moons carved with fossil-shaped trenches, species-wide self-extinction rituals meant to preserve memory in form rather than biology. They did not entomb their dead. They patterned them into geology. Some archaeologists called it madness. Others called it genius. Asha had once published a dissertation titled Ecoposture Encoding in Pre-Hegemonic Death Cultures, a study which compared the Sha'a-nir with Terran Aboriginal petroglyphs. It had nearly cost her her grant. Cassavel had once been a vault of such intent. Now it served as neutral ground, an ossuary-turned embassy. The module touched down with hydraulic grace. No jolt, no announcement. The restraints hissed open. Asha and Roan stood as the inner door slid open. Outside was silence. A field of ash-colored stone stretched beyond a perimeter of thin obsidian markers. Each marker curved toward the center at a precise angle, like frozen reeds bent under invisible pressure. Between them, the ground held no footprints, no wind. The surface was too vitrified to retain impressions. Or perhaps the Sha'a-nir simply moved above it, never pressing down. The sky overhead was black despite proximity to the local sun. Atmospheric scatter minimal. A thin halo of orange lit the crater rim far behind them. Their descent vector had been carefully chosen. No shared landmarks, no approach line to trigger territorial posturing. The Sha'a-nir understood psychological geometry. 3 figures waited ahead. They were tall, limbs long and doubled at the joints, torsos layered in bioceramic plating that flowed when they moved. Their faces bore no eyes, just scent crowns, arched fans of pale tendrils pulsing in slow waves. Each pulse carried microscopic chemical traces. Meaning in vapor. Asha had spent months decoding trace gas logic. The interaction of pressure and temperature gradients in Sha'a-nir ritual scenting had once been thought too complex to model. Then, 20 years ago, a failed surveillance drone had returned with heat-mapped dispersal charts. And a new science was born. The central figure raised a single arm, forearm horizontal, palm compressed inward. Asha copied the motion. She kept her own limbs tight, angle compressed, head bowed 6 degrees. Roan did the same, his every movement an echo of restraint. He mirrored her precisely, even down to the foot stance. They had rehearsed the motion 36 times. They were not greeted. They were observed. One of the Sha'a-nir stepped forward and extended a device. Oval, translucent, faintly humming. Asha reached out, accepting it with both hands. The gesture had been described once, decades ago, by a mining crew who hadn't survived long after. It was a memory token. Asha activated it. A projection flared out, a map of Cassavel's ancient catacombs, overlaid with scent vectors and movement timelines. Sha'a-nir ritual scripts filled the periphery. None of it was in text. The display was spatial. Everything about the interface required interpretation through spatial reasoning. She rotated it, tilted the projection, pinched its axis to reveal sublayers. A delay flickered. One corridor lit up with faint blue and pulsed once. She noted the resonance pattern. She recognized the structure. The site was an archive, not of data, of behavior. The Sha'a-nir weren't offering conversation. They were offering her a chance to learn their dead. Roan stepped forward, scanning the perimeter. He noticed it first. A half-buried human helmet, scorched and fused into the ground. Not Terran compact issue. Older, independent exploratory design. The kind used by frontier range survey crews, often unregistered. He knelt, rubbed a gloved thumb across the char-marked plating. A faint emblem shimmered through. A faded spiral with a double helix inside it. Asha knelt beside it. Her breath hitched. There had been others here. Not all accidents. The Sha'a-nir had not forgotten. A soft tone chimed from her side. The device updated. A path lit in pulsing orange, guiding them toward a trench opening flanked by 2 inert Sha'a-nir sentries, still as statues. The archive would not be explained. It would be walked. They moved in silence. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. Not from lack of heat, but presence of memory. The trench walls bore carved ridges, not symbols but recorded movements. Battle postures, death stances, still frames of final gestures etched in precise anatomical fidelity. Each section held the moment of death for a Sha'a-nir warrior. Not honored, preserved. The floor beneath them changed texture, coarse glass giving way to ridged plates, as if walking on the skeleton of a language. Subtle acoustic shifts followed each step. The walls began to breathe sound. Not noise, but resonance, pressure feedback, like walking through the lungs of an extinct god. It was language through position, narrative through fossil. And if Asha was right, if her readings from the Ball archive held, then somewhere deeper there would be a message. Not about humans, about what the Sha'a-nir feared would happen next. They passed a gallery of stillness, 50 figures frozen in sculptural bas-relief, postures twisted into stances of defense or invocation. The angle of each limb spoke of a moment captured in moral time. Not merely what happened, but what should have happened. Behind them, the trench mouth slowly dimmed, leaving only the pale luminescence of the walls ahead. Asha paused at a branching path. A scent lingered, alkaloid, bitter, low pressure, a symbol of divergence. She hesitated. A memory flickered. In the Ball archive, an incomplete diagram of posture choice bifurcations. She had dismissed it then as ceremonial. Now it pulsed with threat. Roan stepped beside her. Options. 2 ritual outcomes. Left. Defiance. Right. Grief. He looked at both. They expect us to choose. She nodded. And they'll record it. They turned right. The corridor narrowed. The air grew thick, not just with age but expectation. In the final chamber they found it. A single Sha'a-nir form embedded in obsidian. Different from the others. Not a warrior's stance. Kneeling. Head bowed. Crown sheared away. One arm extended forward. Fingers open. Asha stared. It was the human gesture. Open hand. Fingers parted. The gesture she had sent. But not in defiance. In surrender. And above the form, cut into the wall in a shallow relief. 2 lines. Not scent. Not posture. Written glyphs. Asha read them. The gesture was known. We remembered it wrong. The scent reached them before the escort did. Asha Kepler stood beneath the Cassavel night, face uplifted to the still air, reading the atmosphere not by sight, but by trace gas. It was subtle at first, a shift in density, a tinge of oxidized copper and carbon sulfides. Ritual olfactants. Military-coded. She'd smelled them once before, during the dissection of a recovered Sha'a-nir drone. Now, the same chemistry hung in the open air. Roan said nothing, but his posture changed. Shoulders back, weight on the balls of his feet. He'd scented it too. In the distance, a procession moved. Not marching, not hovering, gliding, each step calculated. 8 Sha'a-nir warkin, their crowns flaring in alternating pulses of orange and red. Escort detail. High-threat posturing. The message was clear. The diplomatic phase had ended. Asha's memory raced. The Sha'a-nir didn't escalate through declarations. They escalated through presence. Each new layer of ceremony meant a new layer of readiness. The moment a military caste presented itself with active sense signatures, the next response was presumed to be tactical. And yet, they were not under attack. Not yet. She keyed the comm link to the Argosy Dawn, now in high orbit. Request immediate translation scan on olfactant cluster. Sulfuric vector. Oxidized sublayer. Trihydrocarbon band. Cross-reference known war preamble dispersals. The response came seconds later. The ship's AI parsed it faster than any linguist could. Designate. Overture of containment. Ritualized pre-war scent. Region. Inner chain. Siege epoch. Asha lowered her hand. Roan was already standing between her and the approaching warkin. They think we're going to run, he said. No, Asha replied. They think we're going to choose. The Warkin formed a crescent around them. Not a trap, an enclosure. A ritual perimeter. From the trench archive, they had been brought directly to this plateau. No return shuttle. No words. The memory token remained with Asha, still humming softly against her hip. The air here felt heavier. Not with pressure, but with history. The ground beneath their boots crunched faintly. Microscopic shards of fused crystal, like powdered obsidian. The horizon was a perfect curve, lit from beneath by a distant sun just below the edge. The stars above had taken on a silver cast through the rarefied air, glittering sharp and watchful. The lead Warkin stepped forward. His plating had been restructured, jagged, intentionally asymmetrical, signaling grief dissonance. A rarely documented cast. Scar lines were etched down the arms in a deliberate spiral, mimicry of an ancient punishment ritual that marked those forced to act against their own caste. It extended both arms. Asha watched. Slowly, deliberately, she copied the movement. Arms raised, palms together, then opened. A pulse of orange passed through the Warkin's crown. Accepted. Then, without gesture or signal, the Sha'a-nir parted. Between them stood a structure, low, angular, half-buried in glassy soil. Asha recognized the material. Battle ceramic, impact-hardened, with ritual etchings. This was not a shrine. It was a command altar. She stepped forward, and the scent changed again. Now it was sharper, iron-rich, laced with compounds keyed to Sha'a-nir pre-combat meditation. The air was preparing them for conflict. Roan stood at her flank. You said they want us to choose. Between what? Asha reached the altar, placed her hand on its surface. The surface came alive. A projection spread, not light, but shape, a tactile map of systems beyond Cassavel. The material beneath her fingers flexed like cool muscle, responsive to subtle pressure and warmth. She shifted her palm left, and the galactic plane rotated. Shifted right, and territorial overlays faded into invisible strata. Fleet movements, economic lines, known human habitats. Sha'a-nir perceptions of humans spread. Chaotic, unpredictable, fast. To them, it was dangerous. The map expanded. Nodes of contested space flared. Asteroid colonies, refueling outposts, communication relays. It wasn't just human expansion that unsettled them. It was the lack of rhythm. The absence of ritual. Humans colonized without pattern. To a Sha'a-nir warmind, it was a sign of instability. She realized the truth. This wasn't a warning. It was a briefing. They weren't being threatened. They were being recruited. Asha turned toward Roan. They're giving us the decision. We tell them where to strike. Roan's expression didn't move, but something behind his eyes shifted. He didn't speak at once. Instead, his gaze swept the stars, the plateau, the still figures waiting. The memory of another battlefield flickered, short-lived and sharp. A recon post on Talia's reach. An entire settlement caught in crossfire because someone higher up had picked a site without knowing the language of placement. He clenched his jaw. She continued. They've decided war is coming. Ritual war. Not annihilation. A demonstration of strategic limits. They want us to guide it. To prove we understand the shape of conflict. Or what? He asked, voice lower. Or they strike everything. Above them, the Sha'a-nir scent crowns pulsed faster. The clock had started. Minutes passed without a word. The altar's projection shifted slowly, revealing past patterns of Sha'a-nir interspecies conflict. Lines of engagement etched into the map not as arrows, but as scent trails and flanking postures. In one sector, a faint glyph indicated an extinction verdict, flashing black and violet. Asha inhaled carefully. Her skin tingled from trace contact. The Sha'a-nir chemical language wasn't merely atmospheric, it was metabolic. Exposure changed interpretation. Meaning seeped through skin, not mind. We need to say something, Roan murmured. They don't want words. They want structure. Her hand hovered over the map. Options unfolded with each micro-movement. Spheres of probability. Cones of acceptability. Then hesitation. She remembered an old satellite feed, grainy footage of a compact colony hit by miscalculated Sha'a-nir ritual fire 3 decades ago. Hundreds dead because someone misread the scent trail of allowance as the marker for ritual containment. Her fingers trembled, then steadied. She placed her palm again on the altar. Fingers splayed slightly. The map pulsed. One of the nodes, an abandoned fuel depot in orbit over Tyra 6, highlighted. A decoy. Empty. Isolated. She locked eyes with Roan. We give them that. We give them a place to strike where no one dies. They get their ritual. We buy time. Roan scanned the tactical overlays. They'll know it's bait. They'll respect that it's intentional. Silence from the warkin. The scent changed. Now, recognition. A measured bloom of lavender nitrates. The color of a loud deception. The lead Sha'a-nir raised a hand. Fingers folded back. Palm up. A closing gesture. Ritual concluded. And with that, the structure powered down. The plateau dimmed. The warkin turned as one and departed. The night returned. Above them, Cassavel's orbit flickered with distant light. Roan exhaled. So, we just picked a battlefield. No, Asha said. Eyes still on the empty command altar. We picked a language. The strike came on time. The fuel depot over Tyra 6 vanished in silence, swallowed by a single Sha'a-nir lance pulse, a beam not of heat or kinetic energy, but resonance. The depot didn't explode. It disarticulated. Panels seemed separated. Internal pressure vanished. Every atomic bond, every weld, failed in the exact sequence the Sha'a-nir had designed. The structure unraveled like a diagram being erased in reverse. From orbit, the Terran observation vessel Calder's frame recorded every frame. The strike matched the predicted cadence. Duration, 4.2 seconds. Post-impact dispersal pattern, 94% conformity. Collateral, 0. The compact's first ritual battlefield had held. Asha Kepler watched from a secure chamber deep in the command vault aboard the Argosy Dawn, now in high transfer orbit. Around her, a dozen projectors displayed Sha'a-nir scent paths and structural reverberations mapped into human-readable overlays. Blue-shifted tendrils of molecular decay pulsed in slow arcs over a rotating model of the depot's remains. To most, it looked like a model of meaningless violence. To her, it looked like syntax. The attack was a message one not merely sent but composed. Each harmonic resonance and dispersal fold adhered to a deep structure. Subtle timing shifts encoded intent. Micro-variations in the scent wave phase structure indicated the emotional cast of the strike, solemnity, not aggression. This was not conquest. This was ceremony. Across the room, Admiral Schwef Fanlin stood with her arms folded, jaw rigid. Any response? Asha nodded once, fingers tracing a curved arc across the console. Yes. The scent signature post-strike includes a mutation. They've shifted to anticipatory grammar. They want a reply. Roan, now in formal deployment gear, leaned forward. You mean they want another target? No, Asha stared into the shifting orange cloud of virtual vapor. They want a reaction. Not tactical. Cultural. She stepped to a second display, one showing compact interstellar broadcasts. They've embedded a structure into the resonance. A test of narrative. Our reply must be in kind, not force, not silence. Gesture. Schwef frowned. You mean propaganda? Asha didn't smile. No, Admiral. I mean ritual communication at scale. She tapped a glyph. A simulation began. A projection of a Terran transport ship flying directly through a traditional Sha'a-nir funerary corridor. No deviation. No deference. A calculated violation of spatial code. But the ship's configuration would mimic a Sha'a-nir sacrifice bark length, heat signature, radiation profile. The chamber lights dimmed as the simulation looped. The corridor shimmered with gravity sync distortion. The ship's hull lit with alternating signal pulses, infrared strobes mimicking Sha'a-nir grief markers. Vibrations resonated in low register across the deck, imitating mourning frequencies used in pre-contact funeral dispersals. Each pass left a mirrored glyph in its wake, the Sha'a-nir symbol for restraint. Schwez's eyes narrowed. They'll see it as provocation. They'll see it as engagement. Roan shifted beside her. You're starting a war of symbols. Asha looked down at her hands. No. I'm joining one. The room fell into motion. Directives were issued. Vessels rerouted. Asha's simulation project Veilform was greenlit. The compact's strategic bureau relented. Ritual precedent was now the only structure holding the peace. Engineers debated hull mass ratios and send emission codings. Linguists reconstructed near-lost postures for drone relay translations. Asha remained at the center of it, feeding old Sha'a-nir iconography into new ship profiles. They weren't building a fleet. They were building a story. 3 days later, the Sha'a-nir responded. They didn't strike. They sent. A coded vector of sent delivered aboard an unmanned Sha'a-nir envoy skiff drifted to the edge of Terran patrol space. The vessel bore no armament. Its hull was polished with morning lacquer, blackstone fused with silent pollen. Even its movement across space had ritual weight, arriving precisely 72 hours after the veilform fly-through. Inside, a complex trail map overlaid with morning compounds, victory glyphs, and a strand of living bacteria genetically encoded with coordinates. Roan said it first. They're inviting us in. Asha ran the compound sequences, feeling her pulse slow as it confirmed her instinct. It's a trial site. Shared ground. We speak there, or we lose everything. The map showed a system known to neither compact nor hegemony charts, a void pocket suspended between stable lanes. No mineral wealth. No strategic value. The coordinates had been grown, not calculated. The bacteria's DNA unfolded to reveal trajectory math embedded in protein fold compression. Shwe stepped back. Do we send a fleet? Asha shook her head. A fleet would be a challenge. A garrison, a claim. She stepped forward. You send a translator. The new vessel was called the Lone Prism. It bore no weapons, no navigational hardpoints. Its engines operated in low-thrust silent harmonics. Its outer hull was shaped after a Sha'a-nir memory fragment, an image recorded from a fallen Warkin's scent ghost, retrieved from the Cassavel archive. Every curve, every reflective angle was deliberate. Inside, Asha traveled alone. Her quarters were circular, lined with reflective shielding laced with Sha'a-nir pheromone stabilizers. Meals were molecular. Dreams interrupted by language testing pulses. Every hour, she received new scent bursts from compact translation labs, refining her lexicon in real time. By the 5th day, isolation began to deform her sense of presence. She would wake with scent trails hanging behind her eyes, phantom traces of linguistic inflections that had no sound. Doubt crept in, not of her mission, but of her comprehension. What if they had trained her wrong? What if all she had learned was a simulation of meaning, not the real thing? It took 9 days to reach the trial site. When the Lone Prism dropped into the void pocket, it found another structure already waiting. Not a ship. A Sha'a-nir stage, spatial scaffolding arranged in postural arrays. Designed not to transport, but to present. The stage rotated slowly around a central axis like a ritual monolith caught mid-bow. Asha stepped into the docking cradle. Her breath slowed. Every molecule of air had been engineered. The scent was neutral, neither invitation nor rejection. Her arrival was not an answer. It was a line of dialogue. She moved into the vestibule where lights danced across the floor in slow spirals. Her translator pulse synced with the stage. Then, from above, a form descended. It was not a Sha'a-nir in body, but in code, a semiotic drone built entirely of postural logic and vapor trails wrapped in translucent gesture filament. A living sentence. The air thickened. The lights dimmed slightly. The drone hovered 2 meters from her chest. Its limbs adjusted mid-air, recalibrating a stance, freezing, then rotating counterclockwise. Every movement cast secondary shadows like punctuation. Asha didn't speak. She grounded her feet against the metal cradle, shifted her shoulders slightly, mimicking a Sha'a-nir declarative curl. Her fingertips spread barely. Then she inhaled. And began to reply. In that moment, she understood this was not just a performance. It was a negotiation of identity. To speak wrong here was not to offend. It was to misrepresent what humanity was. The trial ended with silence. No sound. No signal. No scent. The Sha'a-nir semiotic drone evaporated, its posture frozen mid-pulse, its gesture filaments unraveling into particulate threads that dispersed into the void like forgotten language. There was no acknowledgement. No judgment. No error flag. Only absence. The Lone Prism returned alone. Its hull bore no damage. Its chemical layer remained unchanged. The ship had not been scanned, tagged, or altered. It had been ignored. When Asha disembarked at the compact relay station orbiting Dervan 3, she was met not by officials but by silence. No escort. No welcoming party. Only Roan waited, arms folded, helmet clipped to his belt, eyes sharp with tension. He said nothing. She nodded once. The message had already arrived. A new Sha'a-nir formation had entered neutral space. Massive. Silent. Symbolic hallmarks traced in corrosive silver. At first glance, it resembled a blockade array. But to those who could read it, it was worse. It was a ritual quarantine. The Sha'a-nir had declared that humanity was in semiotic error. They hadn't rejected Asha's communication. They had accepted it and found it incomplete. Flawed. Misaligned. To correct it, they initiated siege protocol. Compact space locked down in layers. Orbital lanes narrowed to symbol corridors, narrow passage vectors defined not by traffic or trade, but by ritual legality. Civilian broadcasts were silenced. Cultural outputs, music, fiction, architecture, began to disappear from interstellar relays, intercepted and overwritten with ritual glyphs. Screens across human space dimmed to amber, marked by rotating scent code simulations. The Sha'a-nir weren't attacking. They were correcting. On Earth, monuments lost their semantic permissions. Museum archives began to self-encrypt. Public forums were blanketed with unparsable scent maps. On Luna, transit systems flickered with Sha'a-nir terminal code, rejecting coordinates with subverbal messages of shame. Not destruction. Disarticulation. Asha stood in the command vault on station mail, watching the screens fall dark one by one. Roan paced behind her, gear half-assembled. The lighting had shifted throughout the station, cool white replaced by low blue, meant to suppress the metabolic impact of cultural isolation. Engineers called it the drift light. They're cutting us out of our own meaning, she said. Roan looked over. Can we fight that? She didn't answer. High above, a Sha'a-nir vessel the length of a planetary ring transmitted a single scent burst every 30 minutes. Not a word. Not a threat. No fleet maneuver. No economic strike. A glyph. The meaning, once decoded, was singular. Ref actor. The compact issued emergency declarations. Diplomatic embassies scrambled for obsolete Sha'a-nir archives, unlocking pre-hegemony manuscripts that hadn't been accessed in centuries. Linguists collapsed under pressure. Ritual behaviorists were drafted to military units. Asha became a node, her experience no longer advisory but central. And yet she said little. She sat in rooms filled with tension and projection mist, watching people try to fix language with threat analysis. They were missing the shape of it. They thought the siege was a policy. It wasn't. It was a mirror. The Sha'a-nir had seen humanity's symbolic pulse and found it asymmetrical. Not in structure, but in intention. They didn't seek war. They sought equivalence. Asha reviewed the trial data again. The drone had performed a question stance. She had responded with an affirmative ripple. But what if the drone hadn't been asking a question? What if it had been quoting? She remembered a note from her early training, an obscure margin in a Baal archive copy. Sha'a-nir semiotic drones will repeat structure if they perceive misalignment, not for understanding, but to force harmonic recursion. It hadn't been waiting for her reply. It had been waiting for her to recognize the pattern. She hadn't. Now, the silence was recursive. A loop of failure encoded across entire systems. Get me a visual feed on the scent vector arrays, she said. I need them spatially mapped, not translated. Roan complied. The projection wall lit with spiral diagrams, arcs of encoded scent emissions arranged in helix format. Each burst hovered in 3 dimensions, shifting, rotating. Asha stared for a long time. Then she walked to the console. And knelt. The floor was cold. Hard. Every part of her body registered the contact. Her knees ached. Her breath condensed slightly in the low-lit chamber, motionless. The faint hum of environmental systems seemed to still. No one spoke. Roan blinked. What the hell are you doing? The only thing we haven't tried, she said. Submission. Non-linguistic deference. If this is about rebalancing symbol weight, we have to empty our position. From her kneel, she raised one hand, not fully, not open. Just a partial gesture. The same one recorded in the Cassavel archive. The same one carved above the Sha'a-nir figure with fingers extended in surrender. The projection flickered. The vector array stopped rotating. Then one quadrant adjusted. A scent burst. Small. Fragmented. Almost uncertain. Roan stared. His jaw shifted. They're listening? He didn't sound hopeful. He sounded moved. No, Asha said. They're testing. The siege wasn't permanent. It was an opening. A trial frame. But it could only be breached by a species that knew it had failed and chose to reply not with power, but with reflection. High above, the ritual glyph changed. The air vibrated slightly. A faint pulse, barely audible, passed through the hull. Asha felt it in her ribs. A line. Not spoken. Not shown. Felt. Siege had begun. And now, for the first time, humanity had a way to speak back. The glyph faded from the void. 1 hour after the pulse, after the shift from ref factor to align, the Sha'a-nir sent transmissions ceased. No withdrawal. No advance. Only silence. But this time, the silence held expectation. Humanity had not passed. It had paused. In orbit over Dervan 3, the Argosy Dawn ran dark. Its hull lighting reduced to ritual minimums. Its communications restricted to local silent cycles. Antennae extended into Sha'a-nir alignment orbits. Interior lighting glowed in low blues and ambers designed to reduce cognitive friction in cultural interpretation modules. The ship was no longer a vessel. It was a node. Roan stood at the viewport watching the horizon glow like a low-burning fuse. His armor hung off his frame in modular sections, partially removed. Behind him, Asha sat alone in the silence chamber, once the war room, surrounded by scent projections. They pulsed in slow, recursive spirals interwoven with reverberant bands of synthetic Sha'a-nir audio surrogates. The sounds weren't for translation. They were for atmospheric alignment. These glyphs weren't messages. They were questions without words. She mapped the angles. Each spiral was built not on emission logic, but on harmonic return. They weren't broadcasting intent, they were waiting for music. Not melody. Not tone. Structure. The self-measurement of a culture against another's rhythm. The siege hadn't ended. It had invited improvisation. Roan entered the chamber with measured steps. His boots made no sound on the padded composite flooring. He paused before breaking the stillness. Command wants a gesture. Something bigger than a reply. A full symbolic act. Asha nodded, still tracing scent vectors across the projective mist. They want the accord. The word wasn't official. It had no treaty. No signatures. But it carried weight. Among linguists, diplomats, and interspecies protocol historians, the term accord had become mythic. A speculative equilibrium point where no language was spoken but all position was understood. A ritual closure? Roan asked. Something older than that, Asha murmured. She stood slowly and walked to the projection wall. A cluster of older Sha'a-nir burial layouts glowed softly in mirrored orientation. Some were over 2,000 years old. The archive labeled them not as tombs, but as semantic locks, interred grammar, preserved in mineral tension. It looks like surrender, she said. But it isn't. She tapped 3 glyphs, rotated a 4th. It's recognition without defense. Not that we're wrong, but that we interrupted something older than us and we didn't even know it. Roan folded his arms. So what? Admit we're the new species in a conversation that started before we could walk. Not admit, she said. Participate. And not with assertion, with alignment. The scent field shifted. The ambient light within the chamber adjusted slightly. Overhead, the long-range telemetry lattice picked up a change. Far above, the Sha'a-nir formation shifted. No weapons. No motion. Just a tiny pivot in alignment, 1/2 degree. Roan saw it. They moved. They're opening the ritual envelope, Asha said. One sliver of shared vector. A corridor, not of space, but of orientation. A gesture of affordance. They had one chance. The structure came together in silence. No command ceremony. No tactical deployment. It was built in vacuum by proxy units and automation swarms. Its design drew from centuries of symbolic Sha'a-nir architecture and Terran void resonance theory. Engineers worked from scent diagrams and movement glyphs translated into orbital math. Asha watched from the gallery deck as scaffolds expanded and synchronized without instruction. The scent projections danced in low resonance behind her. She barely noticed. Her mind was locked elsewhere. She had spent so long interpreting others' languages, she had never imagined she might one day help build one. That the final argument would not be spoken, not signed, but rendered in orbit like a sculpture humming with unresolved grammar. Her thoughts drifted to the lone prism, to the kneeling silence on station mail. To all the moments of doubt when she had thought humanity would be misread not because it failed to act, but because it tried to speak too soon. We were never being tested for power, she realized. We were being tested for timing. The ring took shape. At its heart was a toroidal braid formed from 2 asymmetrical arcs. One Terran in alloy and carbon weave. One Sha'a-nir in glass-veined mineral plating. Each segment mirrored the burial curvature of their species' earliest ritual dead. Asha whispered, almost to herself, the unspoken accord. The phrase hung in the air. No one replied. But Roan, standing a few meters away, slowly turned his head toward her. The accord was launched into a fixed orbit equidistant from the Sha'a-nir lead vessel and the compact's longest-running deep observatory array. Neither side would own it. Neither side would speak into it. The structure existed only to be seen. No beacon. No signature. Just orientation. And then they waited. 1 full rotation. Then 2. Then movement. A Sha'a-nir vessel detached. It wasn't military. It wasn't tagged. Its hull was aged, ceremonial, etched with old code from before the hegemony. It drifted into position on the opposite pole of the Accord. Its cent crown lit once, then dimmed. Roan drew a breath, audible, tight in his throat. 2 hours later, a second aligned its bow. 3 more followed, each arriving in silence. Roan stood next to Asha in the observation gallery as the orbit filled with shapes. No patterns, no formations, just ship seeing. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, no war, no peace, Asha whispered. Just shape. She stepped closer to the glass, her breath faint on the cold transparency. Maybe that's enough. She tapped a control. The projection wall dimmed, revealing not data but real space. A slow ring of orbiting vessels hung there, aligned with the Accord. Above them, Dervan's upper cloud layer cast thin rings of light that shimmered off the Accord's surface. The siege ended not with a word, but with a silence so perfect it became shared. Not spoken, but understood. Days later, long after the Accord stabilized and the glyphs ceased transmission, a single packet arrived. Unmarked, uncoded. Inside, a motion diagram. 2 species, 3 spirals, 1 line of convergence. It wasn't labeled, but every translator who saw it gave it the same name. The beginning of meaning. The stars above Dervan 3 had returned to their proper rhythms. No more glyphs, no more pulses, no orbiting fleets suspended in symbolic silence. The unspoken accord remained in place, but now it drifted without tension. No longer a question, but a punctuation. Not a treaty, a shared breath. Yet silence, however beautiful, cannot last forever. The Compact Council reconvened on Vesper Prime. Asha Kepler was not invited to speak. She was asked to observe. The journey to Vesper Prime took 4 days. Asha traveled aboard a diplomatic vessel repurposed from an archival drone hauler, its hold still lined with scent-proof vaults and inert translation drones. The ship's crew had been instructed to maintain cultural low-contact protocol. No eye contact, minimal direct conversation, soft light cycles. Even now, after the Accord, ritual sensitivity had become embedded in routine. Vesper Prime itself had changed. What had once been a sun-drenched administrative hub now bore traces of ambient Sha'a-nir orientation. Building corners slightly skewed off-grid, ventilation systems realigned to minimize scent turbulence, public spaces shaped into open radial clusters designed for silent gathering rather than debate. In the lead chamber, more theater than forum, delegates from 9 Terran and Outer Hegemony factions debated what the Accord truly meant. Rows of suspended seating curled in circular tiers. Every panel flickered with scent-mapped glyph sequences, visible only through interpreter lenses. Below them, a projection of the orbital ring rotated endlessly in pale amber. Some called it a standstill, others a ceasefire. One delegate from Marsgate Authority insisted it was proof of strategic inferiority. The Sha'a-nir had dominated the symbolic layer, and humans had simply complied. Asha said nothing. She watched as the simulations repeated, language reduced to drift and motion. She watched how no one referred to what the Accord felt like. They couldn't. The chamber walls shimmered with scent wave scans and telemetry of the orbital ring. At the center, a simulation looped silently, the motion diagram from the final packet. 2 species, 3 spirals, 1 line of convergence. Outside the theater, Compact analysts had begun a different kind of war. Codename: Intention Collapse. Its purpose: to identify and retroactively map all human communications, military, commercial, artistic, that had inadvertently interfered with Sha'a-nir symbolic vectors across the past 30 years. Its goal: to rewrite history as less offensive. Entire archives were flagged. Childhood education programs pulled from cultural nets. Regional architectural firms quietly shut down. A peace monument on Europa was dismantled because its foundation coils too closely resembled a Sha'a-nir symbol for uninvited dominance. Roan found Asha in a side chamber, watching a slow-motion reconstruction of an old asteroid mining broadcast. The chamber's walls were matte white, laced with ambient filtration fans. The scent-neutral air smelled of nothing, intentional, calculated. The projection was an educational cartoon. Harmless. A mining mascot shaped like a spiral drill head waved cheerfully at animated children. Asha didn't blink. "They're purging us," Roan said. "No," Asha replied. "They're trying to sand down the edges. Make the future easier to carry. He stepped closer. You don't believe that? Asha didn't answer right away. Her eyes tracked the animated spiral on the display. Then, the Sha'a-nir didn't come to erase us. They came to see if we could edit ourselves. She looked at him. They wanted to know if we could learn to intend. Roan exhaled slowly. So what now? We erase everything that doesn't fit their frame. No, she said. We learn to frame it ourselves. He studied her in silence, then nodded once. I won't be on the next rotation. Heading back to Centauri side. I think I need to remember what didn't make it into the archive. Asha reached out. A small gesture. 2 fingers tapped to her chest, then outward, palm down. A signal of acknowledgement, not farewell. He returned it without hesitation, then left. Outside, the lone prism was docked in ritual orbit above Dervan 3. Its external surface had changed. No longer diplomatic gray, it now bore banded mineral inlays that shimmered in ambient radiation fields. The compact had officially redesignated it a semiotic research archive. But among the few who entered its orbit, it was simply known as the vessel that listened. Its corridors had been refitted to house preserved scent columns, ritual scaffolding, and archived gestures, recorded from both species. Some were suspended in thermal stasis. Others projected continuously into open chambers. Walking the ship was like stepping through a fluid history of 2 civilizations learning how not to misread each other. Asha would remain on board. Her quarters had no screens, no written text, only motion diagrams and scent matrices. Her notes were recorded through gestural logging, tracked by body position, hand form, and breath pattern. Language was now something she inhabited, not transmitted. She had already begun a new structure, not a reply, not a defense, a translation in reverse. Its scaffolding curved through 3 deck levels, a suspended atrium of motion. Its outermost edge bore traces of Earth's early architecture. Terran launch towers, tensile curve bracing, modular design. Its center spiraled inward into mirrored lenses, meant not to reflect light, but intention. It was not designed to be interpreted. It was designed to be stood within, not as art, not as symbol, as presence. For once, the goal was no longer to understand the Sha'a-nir. The goal was to teach them what it felt like to be human. She remembered her first archival exam. She had mistranslated a burial glyph as refusal, when it had meant witness. She had cried afterward, not because she failed, but because she had confused silence for rejection. Now she knew better. To be uncertain, to be wrong, to reach anyway, but this time without words, and without error. Not because she had solved the language, but because she had learned how to listen, and because, finally, someone was listening back. The rebellion began not with a weapon, but with a gesture. It happened on a mining moon orbiting Gliese 412c. An outpost long forgotten by diplomacy, governed more by market inertia than policy. No scent vectors here, no ritual corridors. Just dust, commerce, and the rhythm of extraction. The moon's rotational cycle was short, 9 hours. Gravity sat at 41 centimos. No sunrise, just shifts of light filtered through atmospheric refraction towers. A technician named Elon Verdu, midshift, paused beside a cargo lift and drew a spiral into the dust with 2 fingers. Not for meaning. Not for rebellion. Just remembrance. He had seen the spiral years before on a broadcast. He couldn't recall where. It reminded him of something that hadn't been explained but had felt right. The gesture lingered only seconds before it was wiped away by machine draft. But a sensor node caught the movement. It flagged the spiral as a Sha'a-nir vector approximation. The node's registry wasn't central, it reported to an interlinked metadata sorter used for pattern compression in visual logs. Someone noticed. Then another. Then a data technician, half curious and half bored, tagged the spiral's image for network drift study. The signal spread. By the end of the week, 11 outposts across the fringe had repeated it, subconsciously, semi-accidentally, through graffiti, tunnel mapping, even tattoo. It appeared in cargo manifests drawn by hand on plex paper. In calibration curves etched into welding masks. One pilot used the spiral as NAV mark to mark a difficult orbital slingshot. They weren't quoting Sha'a-nir. They were responding in kind. Back on Dervan 3, Asha saw the pattern first. Deep inside the loam prism, she watched the mirrored lenses shift as archived movements sparked with algorithmic symmetry. The spirals weren't true glyphs, not exact matches. But they weren't misinterpretations either. They were relational echoes. What she saw wasn't language. It was desire. Desire for a new shape of belonging. A language born not from correctness, but resonance. A human grammar of intention. Compact governance issued quiet notices. Warnings. Reviews. Reports titled Symbolic Drift in Peripheral Zones. No punishments were handed down. No orders were issued. But the symbols kept appearing. Murals in asteroid bays. Carvings on old railguns. Spirals made of discarded wire and hull plating. One entire hull panel of a salvage freighter had been retrofitted into a concave glyph reflector, useless in engineering terms but mathematically beautiful. It was not revolution. It was culture. Language rising not from authority but from memory. In the diplomatic corridors of Vesper Prime, the rebellion was spoken of only in terms of containment. Analysts suggested counternarratives, cultural resets. Media frames were restructured to de-emphasize spiral motifs. Subtle flagging systems were added to sensor streams. Nothing stopped it. Because it wasn't designed. It was felt. Roan, now deep in Centauri systems, sent Asha one transmission. It contained no words. Just a video. A child in a settlement corridor tracing a spiral in condensation. Slow. Careful. Joyful. Asha watched the loop repeat 12 times. She didn't cry. She smiled, but not with triumph. With something smaller. Quieter. A recognition of process, not victory. The rebellion continued. No doctrine. No anthem. Just the quiet insistence that language need not be authorized to be true. That meaning, once felt, did not require a system to be valid. Elon Verdun never knew his gesture had mattered. The network never traced it back to him. When a local worker scratched a spiral into a refinery dome weeks later, he paused, blinked once, and simply walked past it. He didn't stop to claim anything. But he smiled. And far above, in the lingering scent clouds of ritual orbit, the Sha'a-nir vessels began to pivot. Not abruptly. Not all at once. But slowly. One by one. Rotational attitude adjustments. Sensor lattice realignments. Subtle orientation vector shifts. They made no broadcasts. They issued no glyphs. But their positions changed. Not to intercept, but to listen. Asha recorded it without annotation. No theory. No frame. Just the data, angles, emissions, resonance readings. She stored it in an unlocked vault within the loam prism's inner ring. Outside her quarters, a new structure was forming. This one she did not direct. Initiated by junior researchers, maintained by visiting observers, the structure was fragmentary. Irregular. It spiraled outward across the deck wall, lines of pulse chalk, tension wire, sandstone, and ferroglass. It wasn't accurate. It wasn't finished. But it was alive. She passed it each morning. Sometimes pausing. Sometimes not. She never corrected it. Never interfered. She simply let it grow. And somewhere, in the ship's lowest rotational hub, a drone activated. Not Sha'a-nir. Not compact. Built in between. It moved toward the spiral. And paused. A faint whir hummed in the air, barely audible. A thermal node pulsed once, casting a soft bloom of warmth against the cold hull. Then stillness again. Not departure. Not malfunction. Just attention. The drone moved. Not suddenly. Not mechanically. Each of its limbs extended in near silence, calibrated by feedback not from programming, but from proximity. It didn't touch the spiral on the wall, but its sensors aligned. Light flickered across its ocular dome, adjusting not for vision, but for gesture resonance. Its motion was almost biological, though nothing in its construction suggested mimicry. The drone had no face, no central expression node, only the hum of internal gyro-balancers and micro-adjustment actuators. But its presence was unmistakably intentional. Asha watched from the inner corridor arch, leaning against the pressure frame. She made no sound. There were no others in the observation loop. No formal witnesses. The compact had not scheduled any evaluation of the drone's performance in this section. What it did now, it did outside expectation. The air around the spiral shimmered slightly. A feedback haze from electrostatic tension, barely visible but real. The spiral had grown dense with gesture over the past weeks. It contained layers now, student marks, accidental overlaps, fragments of scent oil traced from memory. No one had dared clean it. No one had declared it finished. The drone began to mirror. Its limbs traced in air, not drawing but shadowing the arc of the spiral. Its center point hovered just shy of contact. Electrostatic currents mapped the tension lines. The air ionized gently. Asha stepped forward. Her boots made no sound on the deck padding. She crossed the observation threshold and entered the arc of the spiral's boundary. One hand lifted. Palm open. Still. The drone halted. A pause. Not like earlier. This one was tense with potential. Every sensor on its hull rotated toward her in perfect silence. Its crown array pulsed faintly with residual heat, not unlike the post-gesture sent emissions recorded in Sha'a-nir ritual beacons. And then, deliberately, it turned the gesture back. A mirrored palm. Still. For a moment, neither moved. The spiral behind them shimmered faintly in reflected emergency lighting. Not red, this station had been reconfigured long ago. The emergency hue was amber gold now, a color chosen for Sha'a-nir semantic neutrality. Asha exhaled. Not a breath of fatigue or decision, just breath. Space filled it. The corridor responded as it always had, with nothing. But the drone shifted. Just slightly. One axis realigned. She spoke no words. But the moment held voice. Later, data would be parsed. Researchers would review the logs, the proximity fields, the spiral's unfinished asymmetry. They would note that the drone's motor output changed not due to command, but to proximity to Asha's biometric field. They would attempt to model a response loop, theorize emergent behavior, build predictive heuristics. They would not understand. But something had begun. The lone prism launched again days later. No destination listed. Only a vector, inward toward the edge of old Sha'a-nir space. Toward the zones marked dark in scent code where ritual silence had never lifted. A slow launch. No acceleration burn. Trajectory spiraled along a subrelativistic drift vector, timed not for arrival, but observation. It did not go alone. For ships joined it. One compact diplomatic skiff. Two independent deep path surveyors. One untagged vessel, its registry node overridden with a blank pulse cycle, a diplomatic placeholder only used once before during the initial contact cycle with the Sha'a-nir. They shared no broadcast channel. No synchronized path. But they followed. Some carried observers. Others archivists. One ship was rumored to be crewed entirely by pattern theorists operating under preemptive silence. Compact Command filed no objections. But in off-channel recordings, several council analysts flagged the migration as symbolically destabilizing. One anonymous report simply labeled it inconvenient but inevitable. No one said why they went, but they went. And days later, the scent arrays over Vesper Prime flared once. Not an alarm. Not a threat. A greeting. Not glyph. Not spiral. But breath. A coordinated outflow of scent pulses arranged in harmonic cascade. Nothing ever seen in Sha'a-nir formal grammar. The cascade pulsed over 30 seconds. Contained no directive. Carried no ownership. But it was felt. Across observatories in 21 systems, analysts turned to one another without speaking. A new ritual had passed through them, unclaimed, unmarked, but unmistakably structured. Resonance patterns matched not existing Sha'a-nir grammar but human musical phrasing. Triadic echo. Rising asymmetry. Sustained decay. Asha stood once more in silence, facing her console in the lone prism's inner ring. She didn't decode the signal. She didn't have to. It was not meant for her alone. It was a reply. They were speaking again. Not as humans. Not as Sha'a-nir. But as something else. She turned from the console. Outside the observation hatch, she could see the other ships beginning to bank into the forward spiral vector. Their drives did not flare. Their hulls cast no declarations. They followed shape alone. Asha walked the length of the inner corridor, past the structure in progress. The spiral had changed again, new marks in tension glass, faint magnetic inlays embedded under surface panels. She ran one hand along the lower arc. Heat lingered. So did intention. She reached the far end of the corridor. There, embedded in the wall, a new node pulsed slowly, soft, slow, unprogrammed. A sensor, but also a signal. A neural relay embedded during the station's last overhaul. It activated as she approached. A single pulse of audio played. Low. Not words. Not even tone. Just breath. And in that breath, the corridor responded. Not mechanically, but with stillness. A stillness that held. Not absence. Not quiet. Something that waited. She placed her hand on the wall beside the node. The sensor dimmed. She did not speak. She did not need to. The signal had been sent. And it was enough.